My behaviour and communications on this podcast are not an accurate reflection of how I interact in my other businesses. Basically, I don't ever swear at children. If this podcast causes you distress of any kind, either by what I say or who I am, then do yourself a favour and go away. Hello people, and welcome to the People Building Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the artful skill of listening. And this is not something that is as easy to do as you might assume that it is. For one thing, when we are listening, very often there are multiple conversations happening simultaneously. The one that you are having with the person who is outside of you, the one that you're supposed to be listening to, and the conversation that you may be having at the same time inside of your own head. Now, sometimes that happens perhaps because we're just disengaged with the content of what the person is saying. And so we may become preoccupied in our own mind with other thoughts. Sometimes, however, there may be something that they say that triggers us to respond, but rather than responding out loud, we begin to have our own internal response to what they've said inside. The problem with having that internal response inside to what they've said on the outside is that you're then having a whole separate other conversation with yourself, during which time you will have missed the next thing that they said. And that might have been the most important thing for you to know about that day. I want to focus today on both how it is that we become better listeners and also how it is that we calm our own internal conversation such that we're able to focus more effectively on the ones that we're having in the outside world. One of the most useful and important things to do if you're in a situation where you need to be demonstrating the art of very good listening is to make sure that you are present in that moment. And by present in that moment, I mean that you're having an outside world experience as much as possible. And this can come from grounding yourself, or in some circles, this may be thought of as almost like a meditation type of technique, where you're going to pay attention to all of your external stimulus, not just what it is that you're hearing, really tuning into what you can see around you in that moment, what you can feel, how your body is feeling in that moment. Very often we're so busy thinking that we kind of tune out of being ourselves in the moment. And the more that we can be back in tune with where we are, who we're with, and what we're doing, the better our listening abilities are going to be. The second thing that might be important to consider, if there is something that's really niggling at you and something that's taking up your own brain space, is to just come out and say so. Get that out of the way, because if you find that there is a point that you really need to explore with them, or even something that is your own stuff that is potentially getting in the way of you being a good listener, even if it's not with them, make sure that you get that off of your chest and out of the way first. I remember going to a coaching session once and finding it a little bit odd that the lady who was coaching me started off the session by saying, before we get focused on our topic for today, is there anything that's maybe happened to you today that you just need to get off of your chest? And I said no, because I was being polite. And then she responded by saying, well, here's something that's happened to me today. And she went into a couple of minutes rant about how her child was playing up and not taking their afternoon nap at the time that they normally would do, and it thrown off all of her routine. And at the time I remember thinking, this is a very odd conversation. I haven't called this woman for coaching so that I can listen to her troubles. But at the same time, I can appreciate that getting that out of the way so that it wasn't nagging at her in the back of her own brain was actually a really good tactic for them being able to focus on all of the stuff that I might have had to say in the rest of the session that was going to be taking place. So if you've got stuff that needs attending to, in order to help you become a better listener, attend to it. Another useful tactic in avoiding that internal distraction is to not make conclusions about what somebody is saying too quickly. Make sure that you do not, in your mind, make assumptions and then start going down a rabbit hole of what you think about that. You have to accept that sometimes people are going to tell you a story about their experience or the memory that they're sharing, and it may be appearing to go in one direction, but then it completely does a 360 and goes off in some other direction. Just like when you watch a good movie, you know, a good movie is typically not all that predictable. A good movie is usually one that has a few surprises in there. So engage with someone in the way that you would engage with a good movie. Expect that there's maybe going to be some plot twists in what they're saying, so that you don't start making assumptions about what it is you think that they're going to get to in their final point, and then end up being wildly off track and having missed a ton of the content that they were going to be sharing with you. In Western culture, a part of what we consider to be good listening is having good eye contact. Now, that is important, but I think more so because it's important to us in our particular culture, not necessarily because it means that somebody is actually actively listening. Part of being a good listener is maybe allowing someone to have the space to break eye contact from time to time and to dip inside of their own mind to get creative or to scour their brain for the memories that they want to present you with. And that means that they're going to have to be accessing a range of different eye patterns. We know, for example, that if someone is using their imagination and being creative in their mind, typically their eyes are going to go up like this. So if they break eye contact with you frequently because they need to be looking up, it just means that they're really thinking about what it is that they want to say, or they're needing to pull on visual representations of things in order to then translate that into vocabulary and language. Similarly, they may be looking down quite a lot of the time, which could indicate that they are also doing some self-talk at the same time, or potentially tapping into their emotions and starting to feel certain feelings about what it is that they're saying. So it's important that you as a listener don't disconnect in those moments, and that you allow them to have the freedom of breaking the eye contact and maybe even taking inspiration from around the room, or taking a breath by seeing that they've got some space around them and being able to use that kind of creative space, as in environmental space, to actually give them space for thinking internally as well. So make sure that you don't disengage if you notice that someone's eye contact isn't what you might have expected it to be. Remember, this is pretty much a cultural thing that really applies to the Western world. In other places in the world, lots of eye contact could carry a very different meaning indeed. Next is interrupting. Now, sometimes it's important to interrupt someone's train of thought because you needed to clarify something, maybe because you see that they're perhaps like changing the subject in a way before you'd actually got really clear on what it was that they wanted to say before. Sometimes it's important to interrupt, not just for your own sake, maybe to interrupt their emotional state that they might be getting into as well. But it's important that we interrupt in the right way. If someone is in the middle of a spiel, like they're sharing their stuff, you don't want to be jumping in, especially to make an assumption about what's going to come at the end of that sentence. And if you do jump in for clarification purposes, for example, then make sure that you indicate that you're going to do so, and perhaps even ask permission to be able to do it. So that doesn't mean interrupt and then saying sorry for interrupting. It means maybe if they're in front of you, you'll be able to go, editing Gemma just realised that I did a gesture in the middle of this video, and that gesture was a pointy finger in the air, and that was not very useful for the people who are listening to the audio version of the podcast. So just so you know, that's what I did. Like this, and give them some kind of a visual clue that there's something you wanted to throw in there before they move on to the next chunk of what they wanted to say. It might also mean that you really use your sensory skills for listening and tuning into the natural pauses that are going to happen as they begin to share what they're sharing with you. For example, as I talk to you now, there are pauses that come up because I need to breathe every now and again. Yep, even me. Even I need to pause to be able to breathe in amongst the ramblings that I'm sharing with you. So if you wanted to interrupt me, then you might choose to do so at a time when I'm naturally pausing for air, or maybe pausing to swallow some saliva, or just taking a break in what I'm saying. You'll notice that as people speak, there are very often kind of almost like musical peaks and troughs in what they're saying, and I mean that from a speed perspective rather than a pitch one. There are points when someone's perhaps really fired up about what they're saying and they just need to get all of those words out as quickly as possible. And then there's other points when they might be taking a bit more consideration over what it is that they're thinking and what they're saying. And there are going to be more natural gaps and pauses that show up during those points. Wait at least until they've got to the end of the sentence before you jump in with whatever it was that you wanted to ask, add, or contribute to what it is that they are sharing with you in those moments. All of these will give you a sign, or give them a sign rather, that you are engaged in what they are saying, but you're not just looking to kind of overlay your thoughts and ideas on top of theirs and not taking theirs into proper regard. When someone is sharing something with you that's important to them, it's super important that you let them stay on topic. Even if what they're sharing might actually be quite uncomfortable and painful for them to be sharing, or for you to be listening to. You can't interrupt what they're saying to go, oh, squirrel, because that's going to give them a really clear sign that you're not interested in what they're saying right now, or that you're not taking it seriously enough. If someone is like leading their heart to you and sharing with you their innermost thoughts and feelings, you have to stay on topic with them. And though there might be a really interesting dancing squirrel outside that you want to draw their attention to, if it is appropriate for you to do that because of the rapport that you've already got with each other, then you're still going to do it in a sensitive way. It's going to sound something like, my thoughts around what you're saying are just firing off in so many directions at the moment, and I want us to continue this conversation. However, I'm getting wildly distracted by the dancing squirrel outside, and before we continue, I just wanted to point that out to you. All right, now you've seen the dancing squirrel. Let's go back. So you were saying this. We'd got to here. Where do we go from there? So repeating back to them elements of what they've just said is another way for you to kind of log it in your own brain, make sure that you stay attentive, but to also let them know, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm fully on board with what you've got to say. Now, there is a particular technique that we teach in NLP Master Practitioner, which is called null set. And we have a lot of little techniques in Master Practitioner that are bitty. They just seem so small and insignificant. It's almost like it's a couple of questions, like, how is this powerful in any way? What does this even do? It's all about the delivery with these particular techniques. So we have maybe 4, maybe 5 techniques within NLP Master Practitioner where the script is super short, and there's maybe just 3 or 4 different questions that you ask throughout the entire process. At most, some of them just have 2. And you kind of go, well, I'm going to ask them these 2 questions, like this conversation's going to be over really fast. But the point is it's about asking the same question over and over again, but also asking it in a very specific kind of a way. So for example, the question that comes up in the null set is, tell me more about that. Now, if someone sits down and they go, and they start off the conversation, and then they reach a point where they think they've shared enough, and then you respond with, tell me more about that. There's a certain way in which you need to say that sentence in order for it to segue from where they are to them actually sharing more with you. If they are speaking at a rate and a speed like I am right now, which is quite fast, I'm in visual mode at the moment, so my speech is fast, my voice is coming from up in my throat, it's quite punchy, it's quite racy, like this. If they are speaking like I am right now, your response, if you want to go back in with a tell me more about that, is going to sound more like, okay, tell me more about that. You can't go into like your deep, hypnotic, trance-like, chilled out voice, because they're going to get frustrated, even if it's just a minuscule amount of frustration. But that frustration will lead to them saying something like, I've just told you everything. Because they're working at a level up here at that moment in time. If, however, you then manipulate, and this is probably your toughest case scenario, is dealing with someone like me, who's talking at this kind of a speed, sharing with you what they want to share, thinking that they've got all the words out, there's nothing more to say about it, and then you come back with a tell me more about that. What you need to do is you need to match their pace. This is so important. You need to match their pace, but also we have a rule within NLP about rapport building, which is pace, 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 lead. And what that means is you do what they're doing. So you're going to start with the pace that they're currently at, and then you do more of that, and then you do more of that. So it's pace, 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 lead, which means you need to do a lot of pacing first before you can start leading them to where you want to take them to. So that's something that starts out as maybe quite a surface level, maybe even mundane, non-important conversation can be taken to a much deeper level where you start to find out things about their values, their beliefs, what they're operating from internally, and you can get there just by repeating the question, tell me more about that. And you might repeat back to them the last couple of things that they said, or maybe something that seemed important within what they had said. And then as you repeat it back to them, because we're pacing and leading, we're gradually going to take them from the rate and speed that they're currently thinking and working at to a lower one, so that we start to take them into a light trance state. And at that stage, they start to become much more unconscious, which means that the information that they're going to be sharing with us is coming from a deeper level. It's not just this kind of bam, 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 surface level conscious stuff. As we progress through what they are saying, pulling back on elements of it and representing it back to them, and finishing that sentence with, and tell me more about that, we can gradually begin to slow things down, taking them into that light trance state and into that deeper level of thinking, just like I'm doing with you right now. So you can tell me more about that. And this is such a beautiful way for you as a listener to really get more from your own listening skills, because it's more like you have some control over the conversation. It's like you are somewhat orchestrating what happens next, but without challenging the content or disagreeing with or passing opinion on the content in any way. But it does force you to really tune in and listen, because you need to maybe pick up upon and repeat back just the most important parts of what they've said. You need to be fully tuned in, and you also need to be fully tuned in because you're listening to the pace and speed with which they are saying what they say. And that's going to give you far more clues about what it is that they're communicating than any of the words that they say to you will anyway. So, if you found this video useful or interesting in some way today, I'd like you to tell me more about that. And you can do so in the comments box below. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and do so now by clicking the red subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell so that you get notified the next time I upload a video, and give this video a thumbs up. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.